Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon and good evening to those of you who are joining us from other time zones. Welcome to our plenary session today, which is going to be looking at the topic of building cohesive engagement strategies in zoos and aquariums. So I'd just like to start with a little bit of housekeeping. For anyone who wants to ask a question during the session, we will be having time for questions and answers at the end. So please put your questions in either the chat box, or you can also use the Q&A box. So if you look at the little question mark icon, click on either of those and pop your questions in there. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Laura Myers. I work as the EAZA Academy Manager, and I'm also the liaison for the Conservation Education Committee. So my work very much focuses on education in various forms, and I am also in my previous work a zoo educator. So I'm very encouraged to have heard so many great conversations so far about the importance of engagement, and I've been hearing those in previous plenary sessions, I've been hearing them in our thematic sessions, and also in the tag meetings that I've been dipping into. So it's really fantastic to hear so many people talking about this, because for me, and I think for our new vision and mission, education is really not just an important component of what we do, but something that's essential to our success. So it's really nice to see us focusing on the together with you part of our mission, our new vision, which is progressive zoos and aquariums, saving species together with you. And it's also been important to hear from some of our external stakeholders, especially thinking about colleagues from the EU, to hear about the value that they put on what we can offer in terms of public engagement. And one important thing that's coming out of these conversations is that it's really about having a unified effort. We can't do it on our own, so this session is going to showcase some examples of collaborative working and some of the strategic elements that we have in place to help make that happen. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker for the day. It's going to be a recorded video, but she is in the room with us. So this is someone who's probably very familiar to you as a former chair of our education committee. She's now the head of conservation advocacy engagement at Auckland Zoo, and also newly appointed as a regional representative for EAZA, the International Zoo Educators Association. So I'm going to pass over to the recording from Dr. Sarah Thomas. If we can go to that video, please.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Hello and greetings to you all from New Zealand. I'm Dr. Sarah Thomas. I'm Head of Conservation Advocacy here at Auckland Zoo. I'm delighted to have been invited to give this talk in the plenary session on building cohesive engagement strategies in zoos and aquariums. The title of my presentation highlights a central theme, which is that each and every one of us in the EAZA community needs to be committed and involved in driving positive changes in our society, which will be beneficial for people and nature. I'll start my presentation by asking a question. How many of you have had a colleague, or maybe even yourself, in the past have said one of the following? I just work in the zoo shop. What has conservation and education got to do with me? I chose to work with animals, so I didn't have to speak to people. I'm a species specialist, not a people person, and on and on. And if this sounds familiar, then you're not alone, because in the past, the tradition was that zoo education was largely seen as a responsibility of educators who taught and told children stuff in zoo classrooms, and that conservation was done by specialist field staff and scientists. Gladly, things have started to shift in the last decade, with an emerging acknowledgement that conservation is a highly social phenomenon. That is to say that conservation is as much about mine and yours and our audience's action as it is about species and ecosystems. Like many conservation organisations, zoos and aquariums are continuing to further their understanding that conservation of species has these social and behavioural challenges, and therefore should be tackled with behavioural informed solutions. Now more than ever, zoos and aquariums are exploring and expanding the definition, the scope, the audiences of their conservation education efforts, and really seeing that all roles in the organisation have a role to play, from directors to zookeepers to catering to retail staff, conservationists, researchers, all have a role to play in connecting and motivating and inspiring our audiences. And it's clear that conservation education should be part of the culture, the mindset and responsibility of all staff and volunteers. And it certainly is here at Auckland Zoo. Now, if you're thinking, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had a global unified roadmap to help me and my organisation on this progressive conservation education journey? Well, look no further, as the next bit of my talk is about a relatively new World Zoo and Aquarium conservation education strategy that was launched at the end of last year. In early 2019, I was commissioned by the International Zoo Educators Association and EAZA to write a global strategy on conservation education, and it was the first of its kind. So starting with the brief, EAZA and EAZA and myself drew up for the project. We really wanted to create a conservation education strategy that aligned to the other EAZA strategies to form that strong foundational framework of how zoos and aquariums should operate, and really recognise the connectivity between these four core responsibilities of all zoos and aquariums. But we also wanted to align to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the post-2020 global biodiversity frameworks. We also wanted to reflect the global context of a rapidly changing environment due to human activity, and really kind of acknowledge the evolution of conservation education in zoos. So it's not just about teaching people stuff in classrooms anymore, it includes that full spectrum of audiences and places and spaces that conservation education can be delivered with a variety of different outcomes, so cognitive, social, emotional, behavioural. And really that's part of our kind of holistic conservation education efforts. The strategy really needed to have a set of recommendations for good practice, something that zoos and aquariums could use as that kind of frame for benchmarking and in some regions, regional accreditation. We need to involve a range of diverse stakeholders in its creation, countries, levels of business, perspectives, really getting that global kind of understanding of what conservation education is and what that future focus needed to be. It really had to have that global relevancy and inclusivity. And the content needs to be easy to read and translate across a wide range of different languages. So you can see this was a really ambitious brief, but we wanted to make the strategy to be designed as a tool to help reflect and audit and improve conservation education provided by all zoos and aquariums, and to really guide their critical thinking about their initiatives to drive better outcomes for conservation education. And as a global yet inclusive document, we had to have that future focus, but acknowledge and support zoos and aquariums at really different stages of their conservation education journey. So this slide acknowledges the many colleagues who were involved in the project, over 350 people from 180 institutions and 43 countries. It really did take a village over about a year and a half. So these people were involved in very different ways. So they may have responded to the initial survey, reviewed the document, provided case studies, and we had educators, directors, CEOs of national and regional associations, and of course key guidance from EAZA board and EAZA council. And you can see the black squares, they just highlight the different EAZA institutions and regions, and also the EAZA board members and EAZA council members that come from our EAZA community. At the heart of the strategy is a framework made up of these 22 recommendations of good practice for conservation education, and they live across and are embedded in 8 chapters. The process we went through to design this framework included exploring and auditing a range of different national and regional association frameworks on education. We then aligned the key topics and themes from our data gathering to come up with a set of recommendations for all zoos and aquariums to endeavour to champion. And broadly, these recommendations call on zoos and aquariums to do the following. So firstly, we want to build a culture of conservation education in our organisations. We also want to appreciate the range of authentic and relevant purposes conservation education has. So creating connections to nature, fostering empathy for wildlife, capacity building and motivating pro-environmental behaviours. We also want to talk about creating strategic conservation education plans with measurable learning outcomes for diverse audiences. And this strategy really kind of wants us to grow our audience's reach while being diverse, equitable, accessible and inclusive. We want to design and deliver clear messages, compelling content and innovative programs, while being optimistic and solution focused to relevant conservation and environmental issues. And we want to prioritise embedding principles of animal welfare into our conservation education and our communications. We want to optimise conservation education training and professional development opportunities for staff, volunteers and our audiences. And lastly, we want to strengthen the evidence and the contributions and values and impacts that conservation education has through our zoos and aquariums. Now, if you're thinking, I already have to comply with the EAZA conservation education standards, is this new framework going to complicate things? Well, you're in for a treat, as this global framework is based and largely kind of complements the existing conservation education standards for EAZA. So since its launch in 2016, the EAZA conservation education standards we know have really fundamentally changed the way that you design, deliver and evaluate conservation education within EAZA zoos and aquariums. We know that the standards have been embraced, 400 zoos, nearly 50 countries, and the feedback you've given us said that the standards are a really useful tool to audit, to celebrate and to further develop your conservation education within your organisations. So within this global strategy, the 20 EAZA conservation education standards have been modified to complement and include existing other regional frameworks and align to that kind of global context that we talked about in the strategy. And so the result is this 22 global recommendations of good practice for conservation education for zoos and aquariums. I just wanted to draw your attention to two recommendations which do not feature in the existing EAZA conservation education standards. They are from Chapter 5, which is all about integrating animal care and welfare into conservation education. The intersection between animal welfare and conservation education and how we communicate more effectively about what zoos do was one of the most cited priorities in the strategy development. And as such, we developed two new recommendations, one which is around animal and visitor interactions, and one around how we communicate the principles of animal care within our institutions to our audiences. And at this point, I'll return to the plenary topic of building cohesive strategies for engagement with an example from Auckland Zoo about how we intentionally and collectively communicate with our audiences around how we achieve the positive welfare states with our specially designed animal species, such as our new orangutan habitat. Firstly, we have training for our staff and our volunteers around the 5 domains and how to include them in active conversations and chats with our visitors. Top right is some examples of our volunteer story cards, which we have for every species in the zoo, and you'll see that it includes the key topics and includes a section on animal care and welfare. And our engagement staff use the 5 domains daily to frame those conversations, and we've had some really good feedback from our visitors. More recently, we've launched a Science of Care campaign, which has a series of web pages and also a series of social media videos from our animal care and conservation staff, all around science-based animal care. And lastly, as part of the Science of Care campaign, we've had some real fun making these posters with our marketing team, which are all over Auckland and online. They use the 5 domains, they link to our web pages, but a really novel way to communicate what we do. I've just given you just one example of how my own organisation, Auckland Zoo, is building cohesive engagement strategies which involve all roles and teams within our zoo family to drive and amplify key messages around the core topics such as animal care and welfare. In the last 2 years since I've been at Auckland Zoo, we've worked consistently and collaboratively to join up our constellation of roles and remits within our teams and connecting them to key EAZA strategies, but also the UN Sustainable Development Goals and current policies, curricula, frameworks from our own country and our own region. One of the results of this process of thinking was a recasting of our organisational's existing strategy into the 7 commitments, which you can now see on the slide. This roadmap reflects our renewed strategic priorities as a community-focused cultural organisation within the Auckland region and as a modern wildlife conservation science organisation in New Zealand. You can see from the commitments, our communities and the social dimensions of conservation are at the heart of what we do and what we stand for. Now, I'd like to finish by bringing it back to the EAZA community level and our next EAZA campaign, which you all heard about at the launch on Tuesday. I'm delighted to be a part of the education cluster on this, and it's a great example for the need for all parts of our zoos and aquariums to be leaning in and collaborating to produce clear communication and conservation education to understand and, I guess, navigate the complex puzzle of the post-2020 biodiversity conservation frameworks. With activities across three main areas of public education and engagement, species conservation and wildlife trade, I'm really excited about this campaign, which will hopefully result in you being more comfortable and confident to engage our audiences in this space. I'll end with this quote from Sean Southey, which forms part of the forewords for the World Zoo and Aquarium Conservation Education Strategy. So we are magical gateways of nature for many. We do have the opportunity to connect, inspire and motivate hundreds and millions of people. But we, the EAZA community, need to proactively start building these cohesive engagement strategies to work stronger together, both within the teams and departments in your own zoos and aquariums, but also between institutions, regions and across borders. Because social change for conservation will only happen if we're all in. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for that great presentation. Very clear overview of sort of the strategy that underpins what we want to do and some nice examples of how it's being applied, and also a little bit about where we want to go in the future with the next campaign. Once again, if you do have questions, please put those either in the chat box or in the Q&A section. You can find both of those by clicking the icons on the top right of your screen if you're joining us in the Supreme Stage platform. And our next speaker is going to be looking at some case studies of how we build good internal communication and collaboration networks within our institutions. Unfortunately, Barbara Tasharova from Liberec Zoo isn't able to join us today, so the presentation is going to be given by Marta Zajac-Tasowska, who is the Director of Education at Wroclaw Zoo. So over to you, Marta.
Hello, do you hear me well? Hello, I'm not sure if I'm heard, to be honest.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So welcome everybody. My name is Marta and I'm the Director of Education at Wroclaw Zoo. And when I was preparing this presentation, I was looking for some scientific articles about communication in general and internal communication and public engagement. I will present some ideas which might not be something new for you, but I thought that before presenting few case studies, I would just like to introduce you to the whole idea and maybe my reflection. And it will be a huge pleasure if we can discuss these ideas after my presentation. So let me share my screen. I hope that it will work smoothly. I did that a second ago, so it should work. Do you see it? I need a confirmation. I need a confirmation that you see it.
Editing mode. You need to go into the presentation mode.
Oh, I don't, Laura. I just heard you talking, but
switch to presenter mode. We can see the slides, but it's in editing mode.
Now it's fine. It should be fine. I've got it in the presenter's mode. Do you hear it? Do you see it?
It's still the editing mode.
That's weird. Because it is in the presenter's mode on my screen. How is it now?
Okay, maybe It's still showing editing mode. Maybe if you drag the slide bar like as far as it will go over to the left hand side and just scroll down your slides.
Okay, like
There we
this?
go. Yeah.
Okay, let's do it like
work.
this. Okay, so obviously there was a few nice sentences about the communication, that it's one of the most dominant and important activity in organization. That's what we all know. And some researchers said that it is required for transmitting ideas and opinions, making plans, executing decisions, fulfilling requests. And the whole communication in different companies, we don't always talk about zoos in general, but other companies as well, helps individuals and groups coordinate activities to achieve goals and plays significant role in socializing, executing decisions, problem solving, and change management processes. And as I mentioned, I was also thinking about internal communication, as I read a nice sentence as I present, that the internal communication is the central process through which employees share information, create relationships, make meaning, and construct organizational culture and values. The internal communication provides employees with vital information about their jobs, organization, and its environment, and it can also lift morale, help create content and employees. And then after that, they are becoming more productive. It also allows management to develop its brand through better performance. To me, it's really important, and I also have some examples, because it is said that the progressive companies, including zoos, in the 21st century, the internal communication determines how effective, fruitful, and performance-oriented an organization is, which is also very important for us as zoo workers, that we are really doing the best we can, and we can engage as many people in our mission as possible. And there were a few studies in different sectors, mostly in hospitals, that I present here, that those researchers documented associations specifically between organization communication and job performance. That means that they studied some employees in hospitals, and if the internal communication was effective, then the external communication and communication in general was much more efficient. And I also got inspired with the Miss Balondi research, that effective internal communication keeps employees on the right track, and it increases the performance of the companies. And the company's worth can increase even by 20%. So I think that we all should think about it. The internal communication is formal, more formal, less formal, depends on the zoo. But I would like to start a discussion on that. How can we improve our internal communication, because it makes the external communication better. I was also looking for some nice graphs to share, and I think that basically we collaborate with many different departments in our zoos, and that cooperation, if it's good, and usually it is, the trust is built, and then we keep more motivated. We have more ideas, and then we have common success, and the success is to deliver the mission of zoos. And to me, these graphs represent few different departments of zoos, and which I'll mention later on. But basically, everyone has giving a puzzle, and everyone can really make a change in communication. Here is also a nice graph. What is team? Somebody came out with the idea that team means together everyone achieves more, and that's what I wanted to say, that we will do more when we really cooperate, which you all know, I think. And the education committee studied some zoos, and we asked the question: how the educational department cooperate with other departments? And the departments that were mentioned by educational department were marketing, conservation, and obviously zoological teams, because that's what we as educators need to would like to work mostly to deliver our messages. And the results of these studies turned out to be very positive, because the cooperation in zoos tends to happen often or very often, and for most responders the cooperation is easy or very easy, which is a really good thing. I think that I'll go straight to the graphs. So we asked 2 questions. The first one was: how often do you cooperate with other teams? It was obviously delivered by educational teams. So as you see, mostly we cooperate with zoological teams. Then marketing team is our really close partner, and the conservation team is also very important to deliver the right messages about conservation activities. There were a few comments. I will not read them in detail. Maybe you just have a look. For example, there is a conclusion that in some zoos the departments are working strongly, because sometimes there is one team that's responsible for marketing, education, and sometimes even for conservation. So it depends on the structure of each zoos. What I wanted to mention here is, for example, what I wanted. I'm really sorry, but I don't here I don't see it well. So as you see, there's an example that education team is actually the same as the conservation team, as we believe the two should go hand in hand. So are different strategies, but basically we know that we all have to cooperate to create that cohesive ideas. And the second question we asked was how easy is the cooperation? And as mentioned before, the cooperation was very easy or easy. And it depended on sometimes even on the personality of the colleagues, which was mentioned in the conclusions, in the comments, that, for example, sometimes cooperation depends on individuals, so there is some up and downs. But on the whole, cooperation is good. So everyone has their own ideas and comments. For example, there was one comment that marketing team works differently than the educational team, and sometimes that's not easy to cooperate. Obviously, I can share those comments with you if you are interested in detail. Then we were talking about, we were really focused on public engagement as in the idea of the presentation. And I found a really nice sentence that what is the public engagement? So the public engagement is the involvement of specialists listening to, developing their understanding of, and interacting with non-specialists. So we as zoo professionals, we are specialists, and we have to cooperate with non-specialists in different ways. And now a few case studies that I would like to present. I wanted to focus only on 2 things connected to the COVID times in our zoo, in the Wroclaw Zoo, because that seems to be obvious that the cooperation between educational and marketing departments was very strong. I was then on maternity leave, so I used the figures delivered by my colleagues, but I would like, as an observer, not a employee at that time, I was really looking at this project as a really interesting example, how educators were having fun in front of the camera and how marketing team was inspiring them to really present well the idea. And when the zoo was closed during the COVID times, my team that time came up with the idea, and the marketing team came up with the idea that we could deliver a kind of educational videos for kids that and adults that stayed at home and couldn't come to the zoo. So as you see, the team produced 40 episodes and they were 2.8 million views, which was really a huge success. So here I gave you the example of cooperation between marketing and education team. And then the other nice project that was presented was Ask the Expert, the zoo expert. And me as an observer, I can say that it was a great cooperation between education marketing team and also between the zookeepers, so the zoological team. And it was live, so we engaged the public to ask questions before the episodes for each expert, zoo experts. And another huge success, like you see 5.1 million views. So I really like to thank the team, the marketing and education team, that we really were delivering that educational message to the public, even during difficult times. We also produce the self-practice routes that are used in zoos, in our zoos, so people can really learn whatever they want and use the special self-practice routes when visiting the zoo. And I was also asked to present some ideas from Czech zoos. Barbara couldn't be with us, but she prepared a few slides on how Czech zoos were engaging the public, not only during the COVID times. So they created QR Quest biodiversity around me in a nature out of the zoo, and it was made for families, and their aim was to motivate children to go out and explore the biodiversity in the place they lived in. And over 500 people took part in this project. And the other nice activity for public engagement was an event called 40 Days for the Earth, that started on International Earth Day and lasted for a month. They wanted, the Liberec Zoo wanted to motivate public to behave sustainable for at least 40 days, help the planet from their own homes. More than 300 participants were involved in that task, and they didn't buy palm oil products. They reduced water consumption, they used bikes on the way to work, they cleaned rubbish around, and didn't use single-use plastic. That was a really nice thing for as a public engagement. And then the Czech zoos, as you see, a few of them, they also prepared virtual guided tours and educational videos that were promoted regularly on social networks of each zoos. And there were also many the quizzes, both online and offline, which helped people to be very active even during the lockdown. And the last example from Zoiklava, that they made a special project, School at Zoiklava, that there were online animal-themed assignments every week with topics connected to schools. And it was also based on math, language, natural history, physical education, and other topics. So students were learning about different animals. They were really forced, or they were very happy to make different things connected to the nature. And it was a really nice, also a nice example of public engagement in the mission of zoos. And as a last idea, I started with the communication in general. I wanted you to think more about the internal communication, and maybe if you can share internal communication ideas with me, that would be great. And if you have other case studies of public engagement, you can always share with me. I just, it was a really short presentation, and I was only talking about few ideas. Obviously, all zoos, they are producing lots of tasks and activities to involve public. So my presentation was meant to be a kind of how can I say it? The one step for sharing our ideas and maybe for a further discussion. Because when I was looking, maybe I will leave the presentation because you can see me. Do you see me now? I hope. So my reflection is that there are not many research done in zoos how important the internal communication is. So I'm really open for cooperation, and I really do hope that we can keep in touch later on. So thank you very much for your attention.
There we go. Helps if you unmute yourself. So I'll start again. Thank you for that presentation, Marta. It was really nice to have the overview on communications and also to hear those great case studies. And from what's been a very difficult couple of years with COVID-19 and the impact that's had on all of us, one of the positives we can maybe take from that is those transformative working practices that educators have been really forced into by not being able to use their normal strategies. But maybe that's opened up some really great new opportunities that we can continue using in the future. And I'd like to move on to our next presentation, which is going to be exploring one of those sort of new opportunities that's come up. And this time we're going to be looking at an example of collaboration between two zoos. Unfortunately, Tomislav Krsmanic from Zagreb Zoo is not able to join us today, but I'm delighted to be able to hand over to our Conservation Education Committee Chair and EAZA Regional Representative and Director of Education or Head of Education at Lisbon Zoo. That's Dr. Antonietta Costa.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Antonietta from Lisbon Zoo. I'm the acting chair of the Conservation Education Committee, and I'm also the EAZA Europe and Middle East representative. And this presentation is also with Tomislav from Zagreb Zoo. He's the vice chair of the Conservation Education Committee, and it's all about inter-zoo cooperation and cohesiveness. So let's see how we could link visitors from Zagreb with animals in the Lisbon Zoo. So just to recall you, zoos and aquariums are unique learning environments and play a crucial role in advancing conservation through education and scientific research to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And this role includes ensuring higher levels of biological literacy and promoting sustainable behavior, engaging in active citizenship, support empowering our audiences to take positive actions towards species and habitat conservation. And in a world where everything is changing so quickly, a global pandemic and a devastating biodiversity loss due to human activities, we must stay focused on creating new forms of engaging visitors. So let's check first what the EAZA conservation education standards say about the importance of conservation education in zoos and aquariums. So, and if conservation is to succeed, people need to be inspired to care about and understand animals and the threats they face in the wild. To do that, EAZA believes everyone should have the opportunity to experience and learn about wildlife firsthand. So that is, conservation education is not just confined to people who visit EAZA zoos and aquariums. It can take place out in our local community within in-situ programs and collaboratively on a global scale, or in partnerships with other organizations, or even with other EAZA zoos. So let's see now a new form of collaboration, first of that kind, between conservation education teams from Zagreb Zoo and Lisbon Zoo. So Zagreb and Lisbon Zoo conservation teams have achieved a new form of collaboration, a special online event during which visitors of Zagreb Zoo observed koalas in the Lisbon Zoo and learn about them from educators at both zoos. Every year, Zagreb Zoo, in cooperation with Australian Embassy in Zagreb, holds an educational event called Australia at the Zoo. And this year, due to the pandemic, part of the program was conducted online. Since Zagreb Zoo does not have koalas, and they are one of the most charismatic Australian animals, we organized a meeting of Zagreb Zoo visitors and the Lisbon Zoo koalas on May 14th. And during this event, educators from both zoos, as well as the representative of the Australian Embassy in Zagreb, collaborated. And it is estimated that at least 130 individuals participated. The largest number of individuals participated present was at 1.64, and since there were several classes of primary schools among them, that number was considerably higher. Also, since access and participation were free and open to all participants, constantly fluctuated all throughout the event, which lasted 45 minutes. And during this meeting of Croats and koalas in Portugal, educators from Lisbon explained the basic biology of the species, the way they were kept at the zoo, the reasons why this species is threatened, and the importance of the breeding program. And all individuals koala in Lisbon were also presented. Throughout the event, participants asked several questions, and educators from Lisbon and Zagreb Zoo responded in live video in the chat room, either in English or either in Croatian. And the satisfaction of the participants was great, and the Zagreb team had to promise to hold similar events in the future. However, the satisfaction of the teams from both zoos was even greater, partially due to the successfully completed project, partially due to the newly discovery opportunities for cooperations between zoos, regardless the distance. So, and zoos and aquariums have an incredible power to engage the public with the ability to create emotions, attracting new audiences, and through them amplifying species and habitats conservation awareness, encouraging individuals and communities to take positive conservation actions and engage in more sustainable consumer behaviors, either if they are in Lisbon, in Croatia, in Amsterdam, or in anywhere in the world. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Antonietta. It's really nice to kind of hear that great example
Yes.
and also to have you explore the link between what we're doing with our strategy and our standards and how that kind of applies to individual activities, and also really nice to see how we can apply that broad definition of conservation education so we can actually incorporate science and conservation information into what was essentially a cultural event. Now, for our next speaker, we're going to be exploring a little bit about how we can work with external frameworks, and I'm really excited because this presentation is hopefully going to pick up a little bit on our previous or about to wind up conservation campaign Which Fish, and also a little bit apply to our next campaign EAZA 21+, where we're going to be focusing very much on the biodiversity frameworks. So I'm delighted to introduce from Galway Atlantaquaria Dr. Noreen Burke, who will be speaking to us about her experience of working with the ocean literacy framework. So take it away, Noreen.
I'm just unmuting myself. Thank you very much, Laura. Good morning from the west coast of Ireland. I'm delighted to be joining you today. I suppose good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Sorry, I'm just checking my share screen now. So just bear with me for a second. Okay, I think I'm going to have to share this one, but that's okay. That's all right. And I will click present on this. Lovely. So as Laura explained today, I'm going to speak about working with external frameworks, in particular ocean literacy, the ocean literacy framework and principles, and also a little bit about the ocean decade. I'm just going to click this to see if maybe your screen might be better. Okay, so just to put it into context where I am based, we're a small collection on the west coast of Ireland. We focus primarily on native aquatic species. We have between 10 to 15 staff members, depending on the time of year, and we have a very strong emphasis on education, public engagement, and also collaborating with others to help increase our reach and the impact of our delivery. We also celebrate, I suppose, Ireland's marine and freshwater ecosystems and promote the value of nature. So the first framework that I'm going to talk about today that we use a lot in the work that we do is the Ocean Literacy Framework. Now, I'm going to give just a little bit of background information here in case you haven't heard of this before, and apologies to those of you who are joining who have. It was first published in the USA back in 2005. It was developed by a group of over 20 educators, and it was endorsed by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And the first documentation that was produced was very much linked to the education system, and it was promoted by the National Marine Educators Association in the US. However, since then, ocean literacy, just like the ocean, I suppose, it's spread all over the world. And it now not only works with educators or formal educators, but it links to a number of sectors, including government, policy makers, civil society, industry, informal education as well. But what is ocean literacy, and why would we as a small aquarium on the west coast of Ireland be interested in using this framework to kind of guide our work and our engagement? Well, ocean literacy is as simple as understanding the ocean's influence on you and your daily life, whether you live on the coast or you live in the middle of a landlocked country which has no coastline. And also understanding your influence on the ocean. So the influences your actions can have. An ocean literate person is a person who understands the importance of the ocean, can communicate about the ocean in a meaningful way, and is able to make informed and responsible decisions regarding the ocean and its resources. So this comes back to, I suppose, what a lot of the speakers have spoken about this morning, this active engagement involving society, and that ultimately our goal, while we're educators is to have a positive influence on actions and behaviors at the end, that the end of the line is that goal. So we have this definition for ocean literacy, but the framework itself then is made up of 7 ocean literacy principles. Now, we have found these invaluable when we have planned our education programs or our public engagement that we carry out in our local area, but then also nationally and internationally. The 7 ocean literacy principles include that the Earth has just one big ocean. So even though we break it up into multiple ocean basins, it's all connected. So no matter where you live in the world. The second one is that the ocean and life in the ocean shape the features of the Earth. And the third one relates to our weather and our climate and how our ocean has a major influence on those. Our fourth and fifth ones, I suppose, come back to those issues of biodiversity that we've mentioned. And even when we think of species, marine species, freshwater species, that the ocean has made the Earth habitable. It provides us with oxygen to breathe. It provides us with fresh water to drink as part of the water cycle. And it also supports a great diversity of life and living things. Ocean literacy principle number 6 is how we are connected to the ocean. So in our shipping, in goods and trade, where we like to live, even our pastimes and our leisure and our well-being. So how the ocean makes us feel, and it's a source of inspiration. And then ocean literacy principle number 7, that the ocean is largely unexplored. So while scientists are working away madly to explore more and more elements about our ocean every year, there's still a lot of unknowns. So I suppose I wanted to show you how this ocean literacy principles and framework have helped us as a small collection to reach our visitors, but also to collaborate with a much wider network. So the value for us in different ways, whether that is our level of engagement, our level of impact, but also maybe from a financial side as well through funding. So the framework helps us to connect with our visitors. When we're planning exhibits, when we're planning programs, when we're planning talks, we can think about those 7 ocean literacy principles and the ideas the concepts we want to cover, but also then linking people back to the effect of their actions on the ocean as well. It's helped us through formal education. So what it has meant is, because those 7 ocean literacy principles consider biodiversity, but also things like the water cycle, climate, geology, wave energy, inspiration and art and exploration. When we're planning our formal education programs, we not only think about biodiversity in the ocean, but we think of it as one much bigger system, and not only one ocean, but one planet. So these connections between everything and building bridges between these topics. It's helped us greatly when we've looked at connecting to communities as a small team. So again, being creative in what we plan. So yes, thinking about environmental awareness and care and beach cleans, but also considering then the biodiversity monitoring, monitoring water systems, and even then like yoga on the beach. So connecting to that feeling of well-being when we visit the shore. Ocean literacy has been really, really valuable to us as a small collection as well when we think of how we connect to others. So we're very lucky to be the current secretariat for the Irish Ocean Literacy Network, one of the only ocean literacy networks in Europe. And this network has brought us into contact with multiple different stakeholders. In fact, the network has over 60 organisational members, and they're made up of academia, semi-state, charities and NGOs, private individuals. So this really diverse community of people who are all championing the ocean and protecting our ocean. It's also helped us to connect on international platforms. So because we're connected to the Irish Ocean Literacy Network, we then can connect to the UNESCO Ocean Literacy with All Network, with the European Marine Science Educators Association, EMSI, EU for Ocean, the All Atlantic Blue Schools, the EU Blue Schools. So as a framework, it's been amazing, I suppose, at increasing our reach and our impact with engaging with others and collaborating. It's also helped us to connect to media. So media, social media, press, working on campaigns together where we were able to get a certain hashtag trending on a day on social media. For example, through the Irish Ocean Literacy Network, we got We Are Islanders trending on World Ocean Day in 2019 and 2020, while we also hosted a range of events, either face-to-face or online, depending on which year we're talking about. We managed to get pieces on our national media, which was fantastic. And it was at the start of the summer season for us, which meant that it then helped us with our marketing and promotion. And we also have managed to get pieces into press as well. And then I suppose we can't step away from how important funding is. And this framework of ocean literacy and focusing on the ocean literacy principles in the work we do has been invaluable with connecting to funding. So looking at funding education programs, funding networks that we're part of, funding new training modules, even helping us to look at funding for new exhibits within our collection. And then I suppose the last thing I just wanted to mention about how it's helped us is our impact, you know, in evaluating our impact. So because it's a simple framework, it has a simple mission and definition, and it has 7 ocean literacy principles, it means we can carry out things like knowledge questionnaires to look at our impact before and after engagement. We can carry out focus groups, brainstorming sessions. We can collect people's feedbacks through words and word maps. We can collect exit polls at the end of different modules and then compare whether, you know, the theme of maybe art or engineering or science had the biggest impact, and we can look at different methodologies. And then finally, it's helping to shape our identity and our vision for the future. So we have just started the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and Laura spoke about the SDGs. We want to think as a collection, how can we tie in with these decade objectives? Increasing the use of ocean knowledge, helping to run projects, activities, be a contributor to the decade actions, help create an accessible ocean for all, an inspiring and engaging ocean, bridging the gap between science and civil society and the people who visit us at our collections and those we meet through outreach. We also want to think about how we can help maybe address some of the Ocean Decade challenges. I've circled some of these in blue, which I think are important when we think of how we map the interactions between humans and nature and land and ocean. When we think about the effects of human activities on nature, on biodiversity, on these changing systems. When we think about supporting knowledge and knowledge transfer. So often what happens is we'll have these wonderful scientific projects, wonderful new inventions and technologies, but there's a missing link between bringing that information from an academic institute or research centre to the public. And that's where we can come in as that bridge between the two. And then the last one down in the bottom corner, ensuring that everyone is included in this conversation and knows the value of the ocean and marine biodiversity and biodiversity to all, to our well-being, to our own health, to our planet's health. So what you can do with these frameworks, the framework for the Ocean Decade, the framework for ocean literacy, consider how you can incorporate it into your collection. Not only through how you reach your visitors through in-house activities or outreach, but also your own actions, which, like Laura said, ties in really nicely to the Witch Fish campaign. Not only thinking about how we educate or communicate with others, but our own actions and how they impact on nature and the ocean. Think about joining up to a local ocean literacy network if you have one, or signing up to the UNESCO Ocean Literacy Portal, which is free for anyone to join up either as an individual or as an organisation. Explore the role you or your collection can play in the ocean decade by collaborating with local marine scientists and researchers and research centres to bridge that gap between science and society. For more information, I've just included some links here that you might find handy. I've put in my email address and the website address for the aquarium in Galway. Also, our local ocean literacy network in Ireland, if you'd like to check that out. But also the website then for the Ocean Decade, for EU for Ocean, and for MC as well. And the MC conference is coming up. I think it's in 2 weekends time. So that's a great one for anyone involved in marine education. And also, the Ocean Literacy UNESCO page is there as well. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to any questions or discussions later on.
Thanks, Noreen. Wonderful presentation, and great to see you being a tremendous advocate for ocean literacy and the work of our aquariums within our community. Also really nice to kind of see that example of how we can really use some strategic principles and fundamental ideas to underpin the whole of our engagement strategy, and wonderful also to see how that's really extended the reach and created these opportunities for exciting new connections. Also really great to see the use of Canva. So for anyone who's working in a collection and doesn't have access to a graphic designer, Canva can be your secret weapon. But moving on to our final presentation, for this one we're going to be taking sort of more of an opened out perspective and having a look at sort of the broader ideas behind where we're planning to go in terms of EAZA communication. So I'm going to hand the stage over to our Director of Communications and Membership for EAZA. It's also the liaison for the Communications Committee. So please take it away, David Williams-Mitchell.
Great, thank you very much, Laura. It's really nice to be here. It's a real honour to be asked to speak at an education plenary. There's obviously a lot of links between communications and education, and so it's always really nice for us to be able to add some communications content to plenaries like this. And on that, I'm going to share my screen. So here we go. Without any further ado, let's start with a nice statement of something which is plainly obvious to all of us. We are all great. This is a completely objective look at how we can collaborate on communications to benefit everybody within our community. So first of all, let me start with a message of congratulations. If you work for an EAZA member institution, you're part of the community of Europe and Western Asia's most progressive zoos and aquariums. Your institutions are world leaders in zoo and aquarium-based ex situ conservation, in situ conservation support, scientific research, but also they're world leaders in public engagement about environmental and conservation issues. Your zoo is probably being screened by peers from within the community by now. You have a lot of expertise, or you're getting it very quickly. In short, you work for a great zoo. Congratulations. On the other hand, despite working for a great zoo or aquarium, the chances of your work being recognised by the public are still relatively low. However much we do to try and push what it is that you do and how well your institution actually works, it's quite unlikely that the public or legislators really understand your work as an individual or the contribution of your institution. That's not really anybody's fault, particularly at the moment. Your marketing department's priority, for example, is getting people through the door. That doesn't necessarily automatically lead to greater public understanding for you or for your employer, or support for that matter. And as this is an education plenary, let me say that as well that it's quite hard for your educators to raise public awareness of the issues. It's not a surprise that many visitors and non-visitors don't understand how great the zoo's contribution can be. And let's be clear, Educators have quite a specific focus at times, which means that making the link between the very specific issues that are raised with animals next to the animal enclosure and the larger issues, while the link is obviously always made, it is sometimes difficult to ensure that the message gets through. Let's talk about some associations and some dissociations here as well. EAZA and the national associations, well, we work to spread the word about progressive zoos and aquariums along with your work, but we only have limited channels and opportunities to do so. Here are some other associations which are not helpful to us. Firstly, some parts of the public associate zoos and aquariums with the worst experiences that they have had at zoos and aquariums. Either because they visited back in the 1980s, perhaps they went on holiday somewhere and visited a bad zoo, but they've also heard an awful lot of people saying that zoos should be shut, and that's throughout their lives. So there's a tendency for zoos to dissociate themselves from others. It helps them to capitalize on an interesting phenomenon, which I'm going to explain to you now, which I call the unique zoo paradigm. In the unique zoo, so zoo visitors, as I said, are exposed to a lot of anti-zoo messaging. Even if it's only subconsciously, they might not be listening to or seeking out messages which are anti-zoo, but they do hear them quite a bit. So there is some residual guilt about visiting a zoo, undoubtedly. So the subconscious view of zoos as bad, it's not supported by what they see and hear when they actually go in into the gates, as Sarah was talking about earlier. Zoos are seen as kind of the magical gateways to nature. And so once you are inside a good zoo, actually what you have heard about zoos and what you're seeing don't necessarily add up. And so what they do is they tend to rationalize instead. They'll say that zoos are terrible, but your zoo is different. You're doing really great work. So, and to be honest, it's easier to agree with that impression of your uniqueness than it is to fight to establish what we call a category of good zoos. But it is a mistake. Unique zoo visitors show us that people will accept the evidence of their own eyes. They will revise their opinion depending on what they see. And so what we should try to do is to reject the unique label. We need to put good, clear space between ourselves and bad zoos. And what we want visitors to do is to say exactly the opposite from your zoo is different to all the others, but instead to say your zoo is a good zoo. And that means we need to work together to show the public as a whole what being a good zoo means. It includes all of the work you do as individuals. So whether you're a keeper, or a registrar, a conservation manager, or whoever working in a zoo. It means showing what you do. It means showing what your institution does and is capable of doing. And it means showing what the community of zoos as a whole is capable of doing. We think that if we're successful, the public will understand what to expect of a zoo, and this will drive change at institutions which don't necessarily share our view of what a good zoo actually is. Let's see what the plan is then. Well, we feel, and this is something that was borne out yesterday, I hope some of you were present at the communications roundtable that we held yesterday as well, but it became clear in that discussion and also in other discussions that we've had that we do need to drastically increase the volume of communications about the good works that we do so that it defines what the public can and should expect of a progressive zoo. We know that your employers employ fantastically brilliant, passionate people, you in other words, working to do your best for animals in your care and in the wild. And we also know how varied those people and jobs are. That passion and that expertise translate very well to most audiences. And let's look at them just in terms of the ones that we find important here. So to the personal networks of social media users, to the national and international legislative and other expert bodies, and to the public they represent and who appoint them, that passion and expertise really is something that you can show off, and that will show what it is that you aim to achieve and why you're doing the work that you do. So what we want to do is to open up the communications about our community to everyone who's proud to work in it. We think that the days of trying to gatekeep information about our zoos are probably over, because simply we cannot say enough using the channels that we already have to be able to make a difference to people's residual guilt, as I said before, but also just to get people to understand where zoos really are now rather than where they used to be. And so what we want to do is to open up those communications to everybody who is proud to work in it. We want independent voices to have the tools and support to allow them to talk about their work and to their own networks. So what we're saying is, if you work in a zoo, we'd like you to talk about it. And we want zoos and aquariums to be comfortable talking about what a good zoo is, to be confident enough to show examples from other institutions in their communications as well. And I'll come to all these points in more detail later, but it is a change of emphasis. So you have independent voices from working in the zoo, so not controlled by the zoo. We want the zoos themselves to be talking about the work of other zoos. And we want to be talking together as a community about the things, about specific aspects of the work that we do as zoos and aquariums, so that we can put a comprehensive picture across about what it is that we do, and so that people can understand how we define a good zoo. And lastly, we want to be able to place experts from our community in the forums where their expertise can be influential. All the people who know so much about specific taxa or specific issues can be exceptionally helpful in changing the attitudes of legislators, but also the local community. So, individually speaking, and I'm not speaking personally here, but I'm great. We understand completely that some people are shy, but people do usually actually open up when they talk about what they love. So if you've ever thought about what it would be like to talk about your work on social media, we would really like you to do that. After all, we all have channels and networks these days which allow and actually kind of require us to show a little bit of our lives. And so what we're saying to you is, please do show people what you do. It is work for you, but it's really exotic for many people. As again, coming back to Sarah's idea of magical gateways to nature, you are the magical magicians. You are the people who do the work that allows people to have that access to nature. And so it is really exciting for people to see what you do. Another thing that's interesting is that your voice is not controlled by your employer, and that makes it really, really valuable to presenting accurate pictures of what happens in progressive zoos. And despite what you might think, it's actually really, really useful to your employer as well, that there is somebody who's talking about what they do and the links that it has with other zoos, and the general overall definition of a good zoo and what it means in practice. If it can be presented relatively independently, that's incredibly important and very good for establishing trust amongst the general public. As EAZA, we can show you how to make the most of your social media channels so that you can tell more people about your work in ways that really capture their imagination. We have a new social media toolkit which will be published in the next couple of weeks on our website. And if you would like to get involved in some social media work about your work, we would encourage you to look at it and to see how to do it more effectively. Everything in the zoo and across the EAZA network is achieved in some way or other collectively. We all have to work together in order to make things effective. And in fact, the interaction of different areas of expertise in zoos and their projects gives a really clear picture of the professionalism, compassion and effectiveness that you all show. How you interact as a conservation manager working in a zoo in France with on-the-ground conservationists in Africa, for example, is really important. And there are so many different moving parts to it that these are the things that really show how a zoo comes together and works as a unit to really make a difference to nature. And it shouldn't be forgotten that we don't really talk about those interactions. I mean, we see it very clearly in for example, some of the zoo TV programs which are made. They are very good at doing this thing to kind of show how zoos work as a whole. And we would like to see that done more, so that people can really see how each department interacts with the other departments, and makes a real difference to nature. In terms of other things that we can do, you have a lot of respect within your local communities as zoos and aquariums, as progressive zoos and aquariums. And we feel that that means that they should expect you to speak truth to power on environmental issues. Again, coming back to yesterday's discussion, there was a very clear steer from the panel that zoos and aquariums do have the ability and actually the responsibility to speak truth to power on environmental issues. It may get you in a little bit of hot water sometimes, but honestly speaking, if you are speaking for your local community, then they would expect you to represent them with legislators on environmental issues. And of course, because this is an education plenary as well, you can do an awful lot as well to tell people about the issues and what they should expect from you, and what they should expect from their government as well. So all of this depends on showing in your communications the full range of relevant expertise that your institution has. And now moving on from institutions to the wider EAZA network, we think that showing the collaboration between zoos demonstrates to the public the strength of our voice when we put it all together. And it generates a lot more trust and a greater mandate to act and speak. And this is where I'm going to have a small hat tip to the EAZA 21 Plus campaign. All of this information, communication done collectively shows how strong we can be and how effective we can be. We also know that competition, and this is an EAZA, this is something that I've learned very clearly since joining EAZA a little over 8 years ago now, is that we know that competition between zoos is quite a relative concept. I mean, the fact is you come together every year to speak to each other and swap notes and work on population management programs, etc. And so there's really not very much that's stopping EAZA members from publicizing each other's successes. What we'd ask communicators to do is to just put a small proportion of their communications dedicated to showing the work of other members from around the community. What it does is it establishes the sense of an effective community with a larger objective in mind. If we're not, if we're showing how everybody works together, then we are definitely establishing that we are working together for nature. To coin a phrase, progressive zoos and aquariums saving species together with you. And we know that the public supports coherent and effective communities much more than they do individual institutions. And this will also, because we'll be showing each other's successes, it will show the level that the public should be expecting from an EAZA member and from a progressive zoo. And that will, to some extent, we hope, inspire bad zoos to be better. We're all great at the same time. Well, EAZA has set up a communicators network. It's a group of professionals working in communications within our institutions. And what we're aiming to do is to work on these three elements together, coordinating our communications, our generic communications about progressive zoos and about nature and about the issues, but also how to get best practice going amongst all of our members in communications terms, how to help our staff to do their social media work and so on. And really, to provide the framework in which everybody feels comfortable about empowering everybody at the zoo to be an educator and a communicator. So here's the question. Are you great? If you're a professional communicator or marketer working at an EAZA zoo or aquarium, I would implore you to join the Communicators Network and have your say. Do that by getting in contact with me or with the EAZA office more generally, and we will certainly make sure that you join the Communicators Network, get all the invitations to the meetings and so on. If you work for an EAZA member and you want to tell your network about the work you do, look out for that EAZA social media toolkit that I was talking about earlier. That will be on our website in the next couple of weeks, and that'll help you to build and engage an audience. If you're the boss, please do remember that your staff work for your zoo because they're passionate about it. Their voice can be really powerful in generating support for you, but also for us as EAZA and also for the national associations and the zoo sector as a whole, the good zoo sector as a whole. So please don't be timid about letting your staff to do all of this work. Also, if your expertise could really help shape policy and we don't know about you yet, please do get your institution signed up to EAZA 21 Plus, and I'm sure the opportunities will be made available to you to really provide your expertise in a way that really helps us in our lobbying efforts and really sets out makes us more effective at the international forums and governmentally as well. And one last thing, if you get the opportunity to praise a colleague in the zoo or in another zoo, please don't hesitate to do so. The more that we speak about each other's successes, the more we can kind of generate a virtuous circle where things are kind of feeding back into each other and causing us to do better work as well as better communications. So just to come back on this presentation a little bit one more time, just because my titles I realise have been quite flippant. We want staff at members to develop their social media networks independent of their employer. We want your comm staff to showcase the registrars as well as the reintroducers. We want EAZA and other zoos to publicise each other's good work. And finally, we want to put your veterinarian in Parliament. Let's build public trust so that we can achieve more wherever we work. And that's my presentation. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience. Laura.
Okay, thank you, David, for that great presentation, and I hope everybody is feeling a bit more empowered to be an advocate for their zoo, for EAZA, for conservation in general. Okay, and I would also just like to highlight a couple of sort of communications and networking opportunities we do have for educators. So coming up very shortly, we do have the International Conservation Education Conference, which is a joint event with the International Zoo Educators Association. So please do feel free to sign up if you're not already. I've just put that link into the chat, and also to highlight some of the spaces we have for educators to communicate. I'd encourage everyone, if you're not already, please do join our conservation education Facebook group, where we welcome all kinds of information sharing and conversations, questions. Please join in with that. And I think with that we can head into any questions people have. So again, please put them into the chat if you do have a question. And while we wait to see if people need some time to type those up, I have a question I'd like to ask. I can't really see people, so I'm going to be reliant a little bit on our colleagues at Supreme Stage to see if anyone is sticking their hand up to answer. Otherwise, I will have to pick on somebody. But what I wanted to ask was, given the experience we've all had in the last 18 months, we're all quite hungry, I think, for a return to sort of face-to-face, hands-on interaction that we've been used to. But what are you going to take forward from sort of the practices that we've effectively been forced into? Which of those do you think you'll be taking forward to form part of your education work or your engagement work in the future? So is anybody jumping forwards to answer the question? Okay, I think maybe I'm going to have to pick on somebody. Can I pick on Sarah, if you're still with us?
Oh, excellent. Yeah, it's an interesting one because I, as a EAZA member, as the furthest away from many of you in Europe, it's been quite a different COVID experience for me. Oh, I've got a bit of feedback. I'll just turn that off. I think what we have to think about is how we want to use this time to really reconstruct what our conservation education is. I think for a lot of us, we focused on site for much of our conservation education efforts, but now we've not been forced, but have been given the opportunity to really go online, to really explore those new spaces and places that we can connect to our audiences. So for me, it is really embracing this new world of conservation education and connecting to our communities and being able to really think about how we can put that to the best use going forward.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I can see Noreen just popped into the Zoom room there, so maybe Noreen, if you had a comment on what you're going to take forward in terms of new work practices.
Sorry, Laura, apologies. I can hear you through one device and speak through another, so I missed some of Sarah's comments there, but if it's the question about what we take forward, I think I can't wait to be able to deliver and meet people face to face. Very excited about that, but definitely the online platform made things very accessible. It made connecting to larger to networks around the world easier. It meant we didn't maybe need funding or sources to be able to travel. It also helped carbon footprints because we were doing things from closer to home. So yeah, I think that kind of accessibility and being able to connect to wider networks is something to definitely take forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't see, is anyone else desperate to answer that question? If the Supreme Stage folks can see anybody, if you wave your hand, if you're still in the VMix session, then go ahead.
I can answer to the question if you hear me.
Yeah, okay, I think we're going to go to Marta.
Okay. So one thing that it's obvious that the international cooperation is much easier now. And as you know, Laura, we see each other every Tuesday when preparing the conference. So that Zoom connection is a really, really good thing. So we get to know each other better, and we can really create future projects. So for me, it's a really great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions popping up in the chat, so I think we'll start to wrap it up there. So first of all, just like to say a huge thank you to all of the speakers today. It's been really interesting to hear all your stories, and thank you to everybody who's been watching either through the conference platform or who's been with us on Facebook. And if I could speak on behalf of the Conservation Education Committee, I think we're really excited to be working as part of our strategic action plan to be bringing education and educators more to the fore within our community and beyond it. And also really excited to be working collaboratively within our own institutions and also within EAZA as a whole. So I hope we have some really great work to look forward to in the future. And I can see also Simon has just put a link into the chat reminding us all to check out the new EAZA 21 Plus campaign website, which I think will definitely be an important part of our engagement work, certainly for the next 2 years. And as a final housekeeping announcement, just wanted to let everybody know that we are going to be having an additional session for presentations from our candidates for membership, which is going to be happening tomorrow from 2 till 4 CEST, so whatever that is in your time zone. I think Yoni's going to put the link into the chat. So definitely it's a really great session to participate in if you haven't had a chance to join any of the previous update sessions. Really nice to see how everyone is progressing with their work. And I think there's no more comments, nothing else in terms of housekeeping. So I will say once again a big thank you to everybody, and enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you again at 2 o'clock local. All right, I think we're going to pass over to David.
Hello, thank you everybody. Just another piece of short housekeeping as well, just to say please do visit our exhibitors in the exhibition space on the platform as well. They very kindly agreed to sponsor us for this for these sessions, and they're great services. It would be great if you could go and visit their stuff. Thank you very much.
All right, there we go. So yes, please go and see our exhibitors before you enjoy that lunch, and we will see you for the next round of live sessions.